Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the December meeting of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority. We are all here minus Elaine Barber, who was not able to join us today, and we are also missing our two mics. My guess is they will join us in a little bit. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. And Jeffrey had mailed two sets of minutes to you that I hope you had a chance to review. They were for the meeting of October 25th, 2023 and November 15th, 2023. Hope you've had a chance to review them. And if there's no discussion or changes, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to accept those sets.
Second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. So happy December, even though it's already the 20th. This marks a milestone. This is the official end of the 5th full year of operation of the ICA. Time flies. I can't believe it. Thanks again to everyone for the flexibility in changing the start time as we discussed at the last board meeting. And then given the few meetings that we have in 2024, we'll work really hard to make sure each of them is worthwhile. We discussed potential guests at the last meeting, and I think Jeffrey will be working to see if we can get Keystone and or Michael Hughes in here for January, specifically to talk about revenue projections.
I did send an email on that subject, but if I can enlist the assistance of Marita, maybe to follow up on my email.
Yeah, and he said that he can only come in by
Zoom.
Zoom.
That's fine, it'll be audio, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
okay, I saw it, but it was so busy, I had to go past it. I
Okay,
forgot to
of
get back
course.
to you once I saw you today.
Thank you so much.
Like, maybe don't ignore it, but I just was that busy.
I'm not verbose today, so we'll go right to the final discussion of the City of Harrisburg 2023 budget. And since our last meeting, we did go through the budget presentation itself, which was very short. And then 4 subsequent budget hearing meetings, which were not so short. Thanks to everyone who watched and shared, and I think in the end it allowed all of us to feel like we actually had been there. And in the interim, we did send out also after we collated all of that, we drafted a letter that each member got to see, and we sent it to the mayor prior to the city council meeting last night, at which there was supposed to be a budget approval or disapproval. And I know Jeffrey and I got to watch on TV while Marita was there in person,
And Brian.
and Brian for 4 hours. And yesterday, Brian kicked it off with the information that he just distributed that I think you'll go over in a second.
Sure.
And then the meeting went into presenting all the amendments that City Council had to the budget. Discussion on each of those amendments, and then a vote on those amendments. I believe we made it through all of them, but which were about 8 or something. But then they got tangled in the 14.
Well, the 14th one is the one that's been tabled.
Okay,
Yeah.
and they also got tangled in the wording and the understanding of some of
Well, some of them are duplicative or
Right.
triplicative,
right,
because there's such a word.
and then, as everyone knows, the city has to have an official approved budget no later than December 31st to be,
It's supposed to.
yeah. And Rita was saying before the meeting that this is the latest they've ever
In a
been.
while. No, they've been later.
Okay,
They've definitely been later, but of recent past. Yeah.
yeah,
Just about 4 years ago, we had one like adopted right on December 30th or something like that.
Yeah, Neil made a point to emphasize that. more
Yeah, last
time
night.
Last night, so.
Was that to make everyone feel better or worse? Yeah, they were like, no.
He was just being informative.
Neil being Neil,
Yeah.
friendly reminder.
And so, yes, everything resumes again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And they still, in addition to the budget, there were several other resolutions and then votes.
Yeah, but the resolutions were tabled because they came after,
Yes,
they came after.
That's what I mean. So
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of
yeah.
that has to still come
Right,
into
but
tomorrow's meeting.
those are all through work session, so they're just approvals for the resolution. There
Okay.
should be no discussion on that.
Okay,
They should go fast.
good. Well, keep
Hopefully.
like. Hi, Mike. Are you, Mike? Mike Wood is walking down the aisle.
Belated.
So let's open it up. I mentioned for those who aren't here, I guess everyone is, that Brian handed out, I believe, the charts that started off the meeting yesterday, and didn't know if you wanted to go through that again, Brian, and then we can also talk about anybody else's observations about the budget itself and or questions about this, obviously.
Certainly, thank you, Chair Carter. Thank you, Marita, again for letting me know about today's meeting, and I remember Jeff.
I'm sorry, I wish I would have told you earlier. I didn't mean to make you rush.
That's me not looking at the email that you made clear about, and I remember from the last meeting, the idea to change 3. So yes, of course, you mentioned the budget hearing meetings, for, I believe that council, accommodated. And we went through that. And then so finally, the Budget and Finance Chair, Asha Green, asked to convene one more time independently, just to get a better summary of, 2023, where we're headed projection wise, and then also to take a better look at revenues for 2024 that's been proposed. So we actually met with her on Monday. And the BA Dan Hartman, he was in attendance as well, because Dan's been really focused on the revenue side in his own right. But based on that, in preparation for that meeting, I put together what you have in front of you, what, as you mentioned, I reviewed last night for City Council. So where the city is right now, now we've crossed over the midpoint of this month, it's a bit easier to project, getting a sense of where we're headed, because the expenses on the check run side were finalized and reconciled before we actually met last night. And then payroll, we know we can be reasonably close based on an estimate for the final payroll of the year, which technically is tomorrow. And then revenues, of course, booked through December 15th, and then just reviewing what's come in, what tends to come in the second half of December. So that's how I formulated what I have in front of you as far as projected revenue and projected expenditures. So based on that, I'm indicating a net deficit of 3.9 million. And that reduces our beginning of year cash down to 19.2 million, which is a stronger cash position than we formulated whenever we put the 5-year plan together. And then, of course, you go further and you look at the open encumbrances that are believed to be what will be by the end of this year, and that brings the budgetary fund balance down to 15.9 million. So one of the things I wanted to emphasize last night is in this comparison of budget to actual, when you look at the budget and how it was originally appropriated and then reallocated during the year, we ended up saying we would end up using over 14 million, 14.8 million in fund balance, which is in that second column there, 23 budget. It's a combination of the net number of 11,639,000 and then plus the open encumbrances at the end of the year. So you can see the budget was projecting a cash position of 11.5 million compared to 19.2. And then further down, the budgetary fund balance is, it gets reduced down to what it shows, 15.9 actual based on and budget of 8.2. So that savings that's on the far right, it's the 7,690,000. So we actually did better than we projected with the budget for 2023. And the thing I thought was good to mention is, even at that, back in March when we did the final AMBAC payment, which was 8.335 million, and that clearly was a focal point of a use of fund balance as a reasonable use of fund balance. So that was that total, but yet our actual savings for the year of 7.6. If you look down at the additional reconciliation, doing the same math where I say actual budgetary use of beginning cash fund balance, 7,187,000. So even at that, we ended up, we paid AMBAC that 8.3, but the actual use wasn't that high. I mean, it wasn't the 8.3. So, and it's a combination of both changes in revenue versus expense. The projected revenue above, we fell short of budget by 2.2 million. And that's primarily due to real estate taxes coming in less than budget by about $1 million. 800,000 is attributed to not drawing from neighborhood services administrative service charge revenue that the general fund usually gets from that fund, from a proprietary fund. We decided not to do that because of the impact it would be on that fund, given that it was already budgeted for a heavy use of fund balance this year of 2.4 million. So we didn't want to increase that load. The neighborhood services fund through November was, I believe, slightly positive net revenue for the year, but December was a atypical month for expenses. There were quite a bit. And it actually brings it down below the water line for the year, I believe. When we look at the final numbers, I think we're going to be like it is a deficit, but we projected that because we had 2.4 million in fund balance usage for neighborhood services for 2023. So we did pull that additional 800,000, and then also revenue for the general fund. There's police extra duty. 1.5 million was budgeted. I believe it should be closer to 1.1. So that's another 400,000. So that 400K, the 800,000 from neighborhood services is 1.2, plus the million less in real estate taxes. That gets us to where we're 2.2 short of budget for revenue. Projected expenditures, the 80 million versus the 90. And some, again, savings there are four major categories in budget, include personnel. We are projecting savings of about 1,140,000 across all departments. That's not one particular department, although police is a big chunk of that for unfilled positions that happen, which is not an unusual occurrence. The services major object includes over $2 million in savings, and a large part of that is the incinerator matter, where we budgeted 2 million, but the city only incurred 1.1 million in expenditures. So there's about $900,000 of savings from that. In supplies, we came in under budget by approximately $1 million, which is very consistent with prior years. City tends to be under budget with that line. And then the biggest chunk of this 9.9 savings is in the capital expenditures. We were under budget by approximately 5.5 million for the year. And part of a big chunk of that relates to the capital need to restore and rebuild the Broad Street Market property. So those expenses did not materialize with the timing of year end. So that's that schedule as far as the ins and the outs, the comparatives.
Any questions?
Can I ask? Brian, specifically with reference to the city's general fund balance policy, which does exist, right? And which fund balance of the variety of fund balances is the policy speak to? Is that the cash balance or the budgetary balance? When it tells you to maintain a fund balance of a certain size,
Yeah.
what is the policy referring to?
I'm not certain, but I'm about maybe 80% certain it's the, you have to take in encumbrances
So you do have to,
into account. As far as, looking at it, say, all right, what do we have to start
Right.
the new year? And something tells me we just can't discard encumbrances, right?
So
Right.
do you have any sense that what kind of fund balance pursuant to the policy was the recommended amount?
I know 5%
Okay.
of the, I want to say the expenditure.
So about 70 million? 5%, 70 million?
Right, right.
I won't quote you on it,
Yeah,
but just as a guess.
Those are like flashes I'm remembering
So
about.
maybe as low as $3.5 million
That-
as a date, as the lowest minimum to be consistent with the policy.
As far as what is available for usage, that's.
Okay, so it's not what should be in the account, but what you would budget for the following years.
And it's a little bit, I really would have to review it because I think the idea was that fund balance policy, you do that calculation and then that becomes a set aside.
Okay.
And it's there
Don't use that.
and you're not supposed to use that unless something
Right,
extreme or emergency comes up.
makes sense.
Yeah.
My only concern was that as
That policy.
now that we're down to real fund balances, where we're starting to watch the ebb and flow of fund balance,
Right.
we need to make sure that we stay consistent with the city's previously adopted fund balance policy. Because, and I think you have, I suspect that these numbers are all in compliance with that policy. But I think it's important and we probably should double check
I
that
agree.
we're in compliance with the policy. That was my only, roundabout way to get to a point. But thank you.
Any other observations, questions? Before we go to another chart? Back to you.
All right, so the second page. And this relates back to the document that the city did for our group here in the 5-year plan. So weeks and weeks ago, when we were working on that and trying to come up with a projection for 2024, that's what the first column is. And these numbers will tie back to the final, most recent finally approved 5-year plan document. So, and when I did this particular analysis, and I felt like it was really good because of the way it worked out, when you get a total at the bottom, and then you back out any use of fund balance plus anything unusual, not typical recurring revenue, just to try to see, all right, what does it mean? Are we really looking at a reasonable, real reoccurring revenue? And it felt like we were at just a little over 70 million. Reviewed this, also took it to Bill and Charlie in the controller's office for a review, and they didn't have any qualms about these particular numbers. So when it came time to build the budget, I felt like this would be a good tool to say, all right, here is our resource. And by the way, the 5 million in the original projection, 5,022,000 of fund balance appropriation, at that time, that was all aimed at the FMB field upgrade project. Meaning we would use that as a transfer to the Senator's Fund, where all the activity is to be housed and received and expended. So, of course, the numbers changed during the course of the budget prep. And what I've done is you can see the differences on the far right, where we've increased particular, the subcategories of the city's revenue and what they mean and how they look. The ones I highlighted on the paper here, it's in gray, are the ones that stand out. The ones that where I say relatively immaterial, I'm not discounting that, but I'm just saying that I didn't go further with a more in-depth description as to why those are increased. I was concentrating more on the bigger amounts. So we're saying for next year, we're projecting 72.2 million. So it is somewhat more aggressive than what that sweet spot of 70 million, based on previous projection. And of that 2.17 million, what I've highlighted on this schedule, it's those 6 lines. That's 1.9 million of that 2.17. So we are projecting, we feel comfortable with the increase in LST based on review of activity, some projection input we received independently from Keystone. The EIT has been very strong. In fact, where we are in this projection for next year, we are almost there in actual for this year. Right now, we are easily at between 17.6 and 17.7 million in actual received EIT revenue with of course a few more days to go. We just received another payment today of EIT, which it was very small. It was less than 10,000, but it seems like that with the way the economy is and market factors makes this a reasonable estimate, for next year, the 17.9 million, because I think we'll actually come very close to this number already for 2023. Public safety includes a new revenue item relating to the Harrisburg School District involving school crossing guards, where the city will be able to bill the school district for almost as much as you're seeing there, that 41,000. So that's a new revenue source. Interest income would be the next item, which again is we've already achieved this year over 800,000 through November. Don't expect a dramatic drop in rates next year. I mean, I don't expect them to keep going up and up, but we are budgeting, as you can see, not quite 700,000 for next year. So there's an increase there for interest. The miscellaneous revenue, this is good and bad, of course, because it's stop loss revenue related to healthcare claims. So as this goes up, of course, that means our expenditures are going up as well, and we've seen that already. We've had a tremendous impact this year. It's the highest it's ever been. We've had a few weekly moments where it's been like $400,000 to $500,000 in 1 week's worth of claims from Capital Blue. So we're used to seeing maybe all in, like our medical, prescription and dental to be somewhere around $1 million every month. And we've had too many months this year where it's been 1.4, 1.5, not just one time. I mean, it's happened multiple times. The second half of the year has been brutal on healthcare claims. And the intergovernmental revenue, that 2 big items in that category includes the fire protection funds from the state. That's 5 million, and then the pension system state aid. We actually did better in state aid this year, and the city received 3.7 million, and we budgeted for 3.4. So we've upped that revenue for next year's projection, which is why that's an increase of 270,000. So I know, of course, Dan Hartman's not here today, but he's been very close to this side of the budget revenue. He's had various ongoing meetings with both Charlie and Bill about this, because they lay into that quite a bit. They analyze that quite a bit. So And Dan on the side he sat down with Charlie and actually went through his analysis memo, where he basically, describes each of one of these categories and gets a sense, is that what the city is saying, is that reasonable? Is it, or is it not? And Dan indicated that the controller is feeling pretty reasonable about our revenue projections. The increases, as far as I know, they're not having any serious concerns at the moment. So, Marita, if you have any, I don't want to leave you out of the discussion.
Yeah, I think the important message is that Dan has done, and our team has done their due diligence to make sure these numbers were as accurate as they can be in terms of a forecast, but we've really dug deep, and Dan pointed out to me last night when we were sitting there that there's several large checks that haven't been deposited by Treasury, and they've had them for like 10 days. So it could be that there's just a cycle. It's a busy time of the year. They have payroll this week. So, but we're hoping that gets caught up, because then that'll validate everything he's saying, help to validate it. But I think Brian's spot on that, Dan's been on an effort to try to make sure that everything is as accurate as we can provide to not just you, but the city council and the mayor, city council, and yourselves.
So that, to wrap this schedule up at this point, the total, that revised projection, the 109,485,200, that's what lays before council right now, in the original proposed budget ordinance. And of course, expenditures equal that total. And I know it's eye-catching when you see that number of 109. And again, the biggest part of that is due to the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are coming into the general fund by way of the ordinance that the Law Bureau crafted to get it to be revenue replacement, compliance wise, and then the city can distribute it out. And it's frameworked around the initiatives that were part of that ordinance. It still has to be properly appropriated, because what we're doing is it's coming in, but then it's to be transferred out to a grant fund, namely the state grants fund, and that's where it'll be distributed to fund the initiatives that are being proposed.
Fine, where do you record that, those funds currently?
Oh, you mean the federal money? The
Federal money, yeah.
Yeah, it's sitting in the federal grants fund. But when we move it, it would move, from that fund as a transfer to the general fund. And that covers the revenue replacement side.
Gotcha.
In compliance with the final document, that one that's like 300 pages.
Fine, what's the explanation for the fund balance appropriation? The change of projection there?
Right, that is, it's slightly higher than what we originally put in the 5-year plan. Again, that's made up of the 5,202,000 of that 5,276 is for the Senator's Fund. The rest is it's a random connecting piece between revenue and expense, but we relate that to I mentioned the incinerator record subpoena matter. In talking to Neil, it still potentially could be some more expense to go for next year. So we estimate it to be 250,000, but not all of it is being put to fund balance. Just the difference between the 5,202,000 and the number you see here, which would be roughly 74,000. That the difference of 74,000 would be applied to that 250.
Looks like the difference is about 250,000.
Oh, yeah, we revised the senator's piece was revised about what would be needed to be utilized for
After we submitted
2024.
the report, right?
So it increased another 200, not quite 200,000.
Where's the other half of the senator's piece, right? That's half of the project cost.
I think I'm answering you correctly. It's spread over 3 years. Like we've moved 2.8 million to the Senator's Fund for 2023. So 2024 would be the 5,202,000.
Okay.
And then the remainder would be earmarked for 2025.
And
That-
then
that-
subsequently reimburse half of that.
Yeah, right, the 6 million that is to be funded and come back to the general fund from the RACP grant.
Yeah.
And then also the ongoing revenue sources that typically fund the Senator's Fund, which is mostly the stadium rent. We would bring that, once that would be realized in the Senator's Fund, it would be transferred back to the general fund. And that's structured to be paid over, I think it's about 6 or 7 years to catch up, to fully replenish the general.
I have a follow-up question, please, on Ralph's question. When the RACP money is reimbursed, which won't be until 25, 26.
We think no earlier than 25.
Right, whenever, because it's reimbursement and they like to do it lump sum, mostly in lump sum. So let's say it's near the end of the project or after the end of the project and it comes out, you made the statements coming back to the general fund,
Right, it would actually be, when it comes to the city,
correct?
it would be deposited to the Senator's Fund,
Right,
right, as revenue, and then we would do an interfund transfer from that fund to the general.
and then once that happens, it's free and clear to be reappropriated in any way that the city administration or the council agrees.
Correct, yeah, restored and back.
Back into the general fund, and so there's no designated use for that reimbursement until sometime years in the
Later.
future.
Exactly,
Okay.
until it actually occurs.
So that's an important point, because to recall, we might be sitting here 2 years from now or 3 years from now, and there'll be this extra revenue,
On the horizon,
another one-timer revenue, which needs to be addressed.
yes.
Some could say it should pay back the fund balance from once
Well,
again.
that's so,
Right.
some might say that, but I guess
Yeah.
we'll cross that bridge in a couple of years, but that's why I'm making note.
Right,
Build a safety net.
Yeah.
In other words,
For the next senators, like capital improvement or RAC grant type project,
or some other
or some other thing.
infrastructure project will
Correct.
come along, I'm sure, yeah.
well,
Keep loaning money and paying back
I
money,
was gonna
and
say,
becomes sort of like a revolving loan inside the.
Well, we
cities.
can't borrow, so it has to be.
And so,
That's the
no, I
way
think
we
it does, but
can-
especially when you can keep getting these excellent grant opportunities, but they require
Yeah.
outlay by the city before the reimbursement. So
Right,
it helps that system going forward. Thank you.
Yes,
That was my only.
yeah, you're welcome.
anything else? I have one more chart.
Yes,
I think it'd be really, really nice if the city did have the ability to set up a line of credit to use for that project, even if it wasn't drawn on. Seeing what it could how potentially low the general fund balance could get if everything gets expended on budget next year. It'd be really nice to have a LOC behind that fee project as a safety net.
It'd be nice.
So this third page, this final schedule, and this wasn't on the screen last night because it was, as we sat Monday with Asha, and it was like, well, we don't want to get too overwhelming with these numbers. But I wanted her to see it. And actually, it's kind of a nice look back. And it does time out with this administration when you think about it. So I started this as on the far right there at the top, the effects on cash balance. The city's cash balance at the end of 2021. And down below, you can see this is actual, and so this is through November 30 of this year. So there's not too much change overall, but I wanted to try to illustrate what really stands out that people have constantly heard, and the more material items and the more non-recurring stuff, which when you do this type of review are more meaningful to see what impacted our city's cash and how we got to where, from that point down to where we are now. So, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Each year had its own brand of unique occurrences or changes. And the difference for from what happened in 22 compared to 23 is on the far right, and the up or down on cash, whichever way it goes. Um, Again, you've heard about the ARPA funds that we did back in 2022, the original transfer, the AMBAC scenarios, the geo debt. Really, you factor in the AMBAC payment we did this year as part of that too, because that really is tied to the original geo debts. That's why that's showing up like that. I mentioned healthcare, I mentioned Broad Street. Our increase in payroll personnel costs, and what I mean by that is really that's just payroll, that's salaries and wages and payroll tax expense. Comparing 2022 to 2023. The incinerator matter I mentioned, it's lower than the total for this year because again, this is just through November of this year. The effort to increase capital expenditures. The damage that happened at its city government center with the water. And then the revenue items, which I've already talked about previously, including EIT, the interest stop loss, and of course the PennDOT funds that have come through related to the I-83 expansion. These right-of-way payments that are not typical revenue for this city that have materialized. I think there might be a little bit of this coming still in 2024, but I'm not quite so sure it's going to be to the level of 23. So our actual cash balance at the end of November, it's very close to this. It's 26,180,000. So it's not too far off that mark. So I felt this was a reasonable comparison. I shared this with Bill to show him what he liked the concept anyway, just to get a little broad, higher look at what's been occurring and it's accounting for our change in cash.
Sorry, Brian, to clarify, the 2023 column, that's 11 months? Or do you do pro forma for the full year?
Well, it covers almost 2 years, right? But I'm just picking out the columns are reflecting amounts that actually happened at some point in the year that were really, infrequent or unusually occurring or quite material. And I guess the way to say it is the overall change, like our other revenues and expenses, we're close to being equivalent. Where these are the items that stood out that account for the change in our cash fund balance from the end of 21 down to November 30th of 23.
For example, like the EIT revenue line. They said earlier that for the full year, you're thinking it'll be something north of 16.6 million, right? So looks like you're showing all of 2022. EIT
Yes.
was 14,600,000, and then for 2023 through for the first 11 months, it's
Yeah, you're right. I'm showing exactly. I'm showing that would be really an 11-month comparison for EIT. That's right. It's not.
just checking that you weren't like annualizing.
No. There is no. That's a good question. There are no annualized calculations in this. It's just based on. I mean, these are actual numbers for the revenue. It's just what they were first 11 months of 22 versus first 11 of 23.
Other comment?
Good presentation, Brian. Very
Yes,
good.
thank you. Thank you
Yes,
very
well,
much.
thank you. I appreciate your
It
comments.
really helps because it gives people the bird's eye view and the perspective, and it includes the outliers, which is important because this particular year, 23 and 22, there've been significant outliers because of the two semi-disasters, the Broad Street Market and the flood in the building, and then ARPA has certainly brought us good things and the grants have got it. So it's good to look at those outliers so you kind of know, what's the real activity that's occurring and, what he and I have to cope with on a daily basis in terms of, oh my, that can't be happening. Oh, that's good. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Ryan, very much, and thank you, Marita.
I'm glad he could make it. I'm sorry I had to kind of haul my way out of there, but I had a couple of stops I had to make before I got here, so, or I would have waited for you.
No problem there.
So the agenda takes us to Jeffrey right now.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In your packet, you received a draft copy of the annual report. I guess the first question is, does anybody have any questions or comments about the draft document? It's not final, so we're still able to make changes to it. I obviously want to thank Audrey, who has worked in lockstep through my various versions of the document. This is draft number 11 we're up to now. But we're almost done, we're ready to bring it home. So if there are no comments or changes, then we would just need authorization, I think, from the board to submit the annual report to the appropriations chairs, majority and minority chairs in both the House and the Senate, and that will go out in the mail by the end of this week with cover letters, which Audrey has already penned for us. So with that, if we could just have that authorization, we'd appreciate that.
Be happy to make that motion.
Second. Kathy? Any other discussion? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for executing it. Jeffrey?
Pleasure. I'll make sure it gets in the mail. That brings us to our summary of bill paid report, which has some good news on the top of it. We did receive our 2023-2024 funding from the Department of Community and Economic Development. Thank you, Mr. Wood, for your assistance as always behind the scenes. So that deposit was made on December 2nd in December and is in our account. So there was, other than that, the only unusual invoice was we paid for our annual audit, which was completed by ZA, which was $1,650. And so we are finishing the month of December with a balance of $200,884.24. Starting the new year with a sufficient balance to do whatever it is that the authority board wants to do in the next fiscal year. And we have total interest in our very conservative investments of $26.32. So obviously, if there are no questions, we'll proceed into 2024. And that is all I have on the business of the authority manager.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We're into other business. Does anyone have any other business, old or new or reflective or?
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year,
Yeah.
Happy Holidays.
So we must note officially that this is Ralph's last meeting. Dagger eyes, but we are very grateful for everything that you've done. And when I talked about the 5 years, you've been there. Kathy, you and I have been there. It's been a long time, but thank you. But you won't lose touch. Every once in a while you can stop by.
You know where to find.
We need more audience.
And I've been hiding in the background. Every now and then she creeps out.
From the beginning.
All right, so it's back over to you.
Okay, we do have a member of the public in attendance. Ryan, do you have any comments or questions
Copy of Verizon report, that's it.
of the annual report or Brian's report?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you bring an extra copy?
I think I might have. one.
Okay, the answer is yes. We'll make sure you get it.
Right on.
If not from them, I'll get you. One way or the other. That's all we have.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and if I get a motion to adjourn, we will put calendar year 2023 to bed for the ICA.
May I?
Yes, ceremonially. We have a motion. We know everyone's in favor, so we'll adjourn.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. 3:44
Thank you.
PM.
Moment.